Last week, we talked about fast cars, so I thought this week we might talk about fast music. Since we're all here, we might as well. We sang some fast music, but perhaps this may not be the kind of fast music that you're thinking of, and now it's not going to work. Let me pray for a second. There it goes. Did you do that, Marcella? Okay, one at a time, okay? So these, these young gentlemen here, I'm sure you recognize them all, right? Not yet, okay. All right, well, this is a band called Anti-Flag. Maybe the next one. Give us the next one. Still nobody, I'm not seeing any glimmer of recognition here. These young men go by the name of Rise Against. Nothing? All right, one more. Let's try that. I see a lot of shaking heads here. This is a band from Reno. These guys are close by. 7 seconds. Nobody. Why am I all alone in this here? All right, one more. Now, I think you guys are playing with me. You're acting as though you have never seen any of these people before in your life. Slapshot from Boston. All right, Marcella, my last hope. Give it to us. No. It's going to be a long sermon, guys. Well, this would be Ian McKay and Minor Threat. No, nothing. All right. Well, you looked at all these musicians. You looked at the hair or the lack of hair, the tattoos, the piercings, the kind of semi-threatening attitude, and you all made some assumptions about these guys, didn't you? Right? Are these guys you're going to have over for Thanksgiving? No. One person said yes. One person is extending the grace of Jesus Christ to these guys. But why not? We look at them and we're making all of our assumptions based upon, we all agreed we didn't know who they were. We've never met most of them. And so we're just looking at what we see in our eyes here, and we've made an assumption that these are guys that if they were on one side of the street, we'd cross over to the other side of the street. Is that correct? Do I understand the general consensus here? Marcella, put the next slide up here. There we go. Well, I'm going to tell you something that you didn't draw from the appearance of all of these august young men. They have one thing in common, and that each one of those groups has as their primary message self-control. Now, you looked at them and you said, that looks to me, Pastor, like anything but self-control. That looks like borderline out of control. But they represent a small genre of music that sings about one thing, and that is a positive lifestyle, a positive attitude, and complete self-control. They represent a type of music that goes by the name straight edge, and that is everything that describes it. These bands, all those guys with no hair, long dreadlock hair, whatever it was, they represent the idea that you need to exercise control over your life. You cannot be like so many other musicians and their fans would be. Now, dabbling in drugs, alcohol, promiscuous sex, those kinds of things that are so often represented by rock music, these musicians have taken their message in a completely different way. Every song that those bands sing is about action, is about taking self-control, is about being self-reliant, is about having a positive mental attitude. And yet we trashed them because of the way they looked. We looked at their appearance, and especially maybe in the last couple of slides there, the guys were singing, and it seemed a little scary to us. And we said, well, that couldn't possibly be anything positive. That could not possibly be anything that we would want to hear. And probably musically, it's not. But if we were to take their message and separate it from the music and just see the message, we would see no alcohol, no drugs, in some cases a vegan lifestyle, in some cases no premarital sex, all positive messages that you would say Christians would stand up for. Control yourself, have self-control because of who you represent. And that's what these bands were trying to communicate in their message. They're trying to communicate to the people, the masses of young kids and older kids too, who are there listening to them, that you don't have to go down that path. That drugs, alcohol, sex, all those things are not a given. That you can choose to walk a different path and still have the life that you want. And what's amazing is that idea of self-control, in a lot of ways, matches up with the biblical idea of self-control. Self-control is an inherent gift brought within people who are followers of Christ, because it is one way that we can exhibit the positive influence of the Spirit and of Christ upon us. It is a way for us to exercise control over our life, mindful of the fact that Christ was sacrificed so that we might be redeemed. Mindful that we are now standing in the place of Christ as his ambassadors, as his representatives here in this world. And so self-control comes at the end of this long list of attributes that the Spirit works up in us. Remember how it starts? With love. The first fruit that is demonstrated within you and I as followers of Christ is love. Love for God is our first, but love for one another, love for other people. And from that love, everything else derives. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. All of that, all the way out until we arrive at self-control. But here's the reality about self-control. None of us starts there. The fruit within us, the Spirit's transformation of us, does not start with self-control. That is the hardest of the attributes for you and I to put on. That is the most difficult of the attributes for the Spirit to develop within us. Because if we don't have love over here, we're never going to be able to be self-controlled, because we don't have a reason to do so. Right? Unless we have a purpose for being self-controlled, unless we have a purpose for being at peace, for being good, all of those things, well, then we never exercise those things. So the first fruit is love. That love leads us over to finally becoming or having self-control. Turn to Proverbs real quickly. I want to start there. Proverbs 25. Proverbs, the 28th verse of Proverbs 25 goes like this. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. And we read this description in Proverbs, and what we get is a picture of the general weakness of humankind, of men and women. It describes in legal detail the way that a person who lacks self-control will appear to other people. Now, we're reading this in English, and we miss out on what somebody hearing this in Hebrew would understand, that there are two components to this self-control. First of all, if you lack self-control, the walls that it talks about falling down, your life is going to crumble around you. And that just makes common sense. We can all picture that in our mind. A person who has little or no self-control is basically going to find themselves in trouble over and over and over, because whichever way the wind blows, whichever thing their buddies lead them up to, that's what they're going to do. They don't have any self-control. They can't guide themselves, and so therefore they're going to find themselves in trouble, and pretty soon, as it describes with the walls falling down, their life is just simply going to be a shambles all around them. But here's what we miss in English. When it says, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control, it describes something that is disgraceful, something that is in no way honoring of God. When Nehemiah goes and he views the fallen walls and the burned gates of Jerusalem, how does he react to that? He weeps. He is heartbroken. And why is that? Not because the walls have fallen down, not because the city has generally fallen in disrepair, but because that was the city of God. That was where Yahweh was represented to all of the peoples of the world. And when he looks in on the city of God, when he looks in and he sees the city of God in shambles, when he sees her walls broken down and her gates burned and nobody cares at all, he is brokenhearted, because that is bringing disgrace upon God. And that's what this is representing. These proverbs are not for everybody. They were written for God's people. And so God's people look at self-control as something that is to be exercised to stay out of trouble. But self-control gets exercised because it's a way that we honor God as well. It is a way in which we exhibit that God is working in our life. It is a way that his church is to be seen as the temple, the place of God. It is all of those things bound up together. And so to lack self-control, to not have the self-control that is expected of us, not only leads us into trouble, but brings disgrace upon God. And none of us wants to do that. Now flip your Bibles over to 2 Peter. 2 Peter in the first chapter. I want to read this little section to you. I'm going to start in verse 3. His divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Through these, he has given us his very great and precious promises, so that through them you may participate in the divine nature, having escaped the corruption in the world caused by evil desires. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's interesting that Peter writes that. One of the great things that we get to see in the New Testament is two Peters. You know, we encounter Paul so often over and over and over, and Paul seems to have come out of the womb as this fully mature, theologically astute person. We don't see him, other than his transformation after getting knocked off the horse, we don't see him growing in his knowledge. But boy, what do we see in Peter? Peter, the first time we encounter him, is this guy with no impulse control whatsoever. Whatever words pop up into his head come shooting out of his mouth, don't they? Before he can even think about it. And every time we see Jesus just looking at him like, did you really just say that? Are you serious? I've been with you for all these years. You and I have done this and this and this together, and you still say the most incredible things, Peter. And finally, up to that last point, I'll never leave you, Jesus. I'll never abandon you. I'm with you all the way to the end until I'm not. Peter is incredibly immature until the Spirit begins to work in him. When we encounter Peter in the Gospels, we see the immature Peter. We see Peter who is just figuring out what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. When we see the actions of Peter in Acts, we see him starting to grow up. A little more responsibility is placed on him. The Spirit begins to have more of an influence in his life, and he begins to mature. But he's still impetuous. He still has his moments where he stomps his foot and says, no, it's my way or no way. But Jesus and his grace just continue to flow in Peter's life. All the way until later in life, Peter writes this incredible letter. And this is just filled with maturity. This is the Peter that has been transformed from that rough fisherman, that fisherman where stuff would just fly out of his mouth, to a fully mature follower of Christ. And he pens these beautiful words. And the first thing he says, his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who's called us by his own glory and goodness. That's it. That is a summary of everything we've talked about for the past 2 months. He has given us everything. You and I, with the Spirit dwelling within us, lack nothing. You and I have nothing missing in our life. What we're missing, more often than not, is the maturity and the growth to this point. You have the seeds of all of this fruit, the love, the joy, the peace, all of that stuff. That's all within you. The Spirit is more than willing, with your cooperation, to develop that within you. But you have to go along. Remember, each week it has been an application of that truth that we have to be intentional about practicing these things. It's one thing for me to stand up here and say, have peace! But it's another thing to actually do it. I can't tell you. I can't yell it louder and have it happen in your life. You have to decide to cooperate with the Spirit and let that peace mark your life. I'm sorry. If I could stand up here and go, have joy, and you would do it, I would do that for you. I would do that for you because I love you that much. But I can't. You have to cooperate with the Spirit. And the Spirit can show you that despite the ups and downs that you have in life, whatever troubles you're facing, you can have joy through them all. But you have to work with the Spirit. He wants to develop that. And on and on and on. Peace, joy, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, all that stuff leads up to self-control. And as I said a minute ago, self-control is all the way at the end because the other gifts have to develop before you can get there. And why is that? Because in order for you to have self-control, other than the self-control where you grit your teeth and say, I won't, until you do, okay? You have to have a reason for doing it. That's why this is so much different from what is said in Proverbs. Proverbs just gave you this great word picture. Well, no self-control, your life's going to be a shambles. Deal with it. I'm sure that's what it said in Hebrew. Deal with it. But the follower of Christ never has to just deal with it. You have all of the seeds of everything that's necessary for you to be fully self-controlled once you realize the reason for you to be self-controlled. And the reason is quite simply, you are a child of God, but you are also left here in the world as his church to be his ambassador, to represent him in this world. You represent Christ in this world through your actions, through the words that you share, through your charity, through your grace that you extend to others, through the love that you show to your neighbor, through everything. And the whole purpose of that, the whole purpose of you being transformed is not so that you can be more awesome. The whole purpose in you being transformed, in this gift, in all of these gifts, being matured and grown up and made bigger in you, is so that you can be a more effective ambassador, so that you can share the truth with more people, so that you can have one more opportunity to share the reason for the hope that you have. You have every single thing in you. He says, all right, you have all this stuff in you. Now here's how you go about building it up. It's not going to just happen, right? It's not like Howard's hair and my hair. It just went away, gradually. We didn't even notice it until one day there we were, right? But we didn't work at it. That's the point, right? We didn't work at making the hair go away. And it's the same thing with this. You've got to cooperate with the Spirit. You've got to let the Spirit build this stuff up in you. And that's why he starts here in verse 5. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith. And this is not you doing works that's earning more grace from Christ. This is you cooperating with the Spirit. Make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control. Well, that's a lifetime worth of work right there. We don't even need to go past that. Okay? Make every effort to add to the faith that you have goodness. Let that faith influence the good that's in you and show more good than bad. Then add to that goodness knowledge. Understand why it is you're doing what you're doing, and add to that knowledge self-control. I mean, if you only make it that far in life, you will be so far ahead of the rest of the world, it'll be incredible. People will look at you and say, there's something special about that person. Just like we did with all those guys that we saw in the picture. There was something special about those young men. But then Peter goes on. Add to your self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, and to mutual affection love. If we only get as far as self-control, we're ahead of the world, but we don't get to stop there. If we just get our behavior and our impulse control under the governance of the Spirit, we're good, but we can't stop there, because look at how this goes. This goes in this big arc back to love. Remember how love started all of this, and it ends all of this. We want to be more self-controlled because we love Jesus Christ. We want to show more faithfulness because we love Jesus Christ. We want more goodness in our life because we love Jesus Christ, and we love one another. And that's why all of this leads back to a greater love. And it's that love. I mean, our behavior is going to get us an opportunity to share the gospel. But it's that love. If people see genuine love for one another in us, we won't be able to stop them wanting to know how it is that we managed to do this, how it is we managed to stand apart. And he finishes like this: for if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. In other words, your discipleship is going to be a product of how much you love Christ, because you want to be more like him, because you want an opportunity to share that truth with somebody else, because you love him, And because you love him, this cycle keeps going and going and going. None of you are ever going to be finished. As perfect as you all are, none of you are ever going to be finished. If you think you have reached the peak love that you have in your life, the Spirit says, wait, there's more. I have more love that I can generate in you if you will cooperate with me. And a whole new cycle starts. And you grow some more, you grow some more. When you're fully grown, you'll be home. That's the way this works. Once you are fully grown, you'll be at home already. And then it won't be necessary anymore. But while we spend our time together here on earth, in this world, in a place where we've been called to make disciples, this cycle continues on and on and on. Now, the downside of what he just said is that if you are not engaged in any kind of discipleship, if you're not even taking the first steps of discipleship, you lack all the knowledge, you lack the power, you lack the transformational possibilities that the Spirit has for you. You're lacking. You're going to be unproductive because you're never growing up. You're being that milk drinker that's described in the Bible there. You got to grow up and be meat eaters is what he's leading up to. So he's given us a reason. He's given us a purpose for being mature. He's given us a purpose for having greater self-control or for looking for more self-control. And he says, listen, it's not going to happen on its own. You've got to cooperate. You have to work at this. You have to be a part of the process. So, in other words, if we're going to grow in love, if that seed of love is going to grow in it, we actually have to love people. You all have to start loving each other. That's where you start. So if that's going to grow within you, if you're going to have more peace within you, you've got to be more peaceful. You've got to decide that that's something that's going to mark. And same with joy, goodness, kindness, all that stuff. If that's going to be something that's in you, you have to make the decision and be intentional about pursuing that in your life. And now I'm going to let you in on a little secret here, okay? If you want more self-control, if you want to have more and growing self-control in your life, it starts in one place. Right there. Everything that you do starts here in your mind. Everything you're going to say starts here in your mind. Every action that you take, every reaction that you have to somebody starts here in your mind. Every sin that you engage in starts with you playing with that sin in your mind. Can I get away with it? Will I get caught? Will anybody know? And you spin it over in your mind. So the secret to self-control is getting control of your thought life. And this is not me saying this. I think Paul says this in 2 Corinthians, right? For this reason, I take every thought captive to Jesus Christ. Every thought captive to Jesus Christ. Imagine if you started doing that. The next time that you're going to gossip, not you, but the next time that somebody's going to gossip, the next time that you're going to say something ugly about your neighbor, the next time you're going to have an ill thought about somebody who's sitting around you, the next time, here's what I want you to do. Don't do it for a second. Just stop and go, well, Jesus, is it okay if I gossip? Jesus, is it okay if I say this ugly thing about my sister or my brother? Jesus, is it okay if I think this thought about this person? Jesus, would it be okay if I acted in this manner? And if the Spirit says go ahead and do it, you feel free to go ahead and do it. But I'm guessing that if you really have a connection with the Holy Spirit within you, the Spirit's going to say, nah, probably not. Probably not. Probably don't gossip about that person. probably don't have that thought about that person. Probably don't say what's about to come out of your mouth to that person. All of our actions, all of our speech, all of our thoughts, it all starts up here in our mind. And so if we are intentional about this, if we are intentional about having this positive attitude about life and our actions, it has to start up here. And so we take all these things captive to Christ. We take them to Christ, we take them to the Spirit and say, all right, Spirit, should I or shouldn't I? Now, you're not going to have to do that forever. That's how you learn to do this. Pretty soon, you'll be ahead of the Spirit, won't you? Pretty soon you'll be mature, and you'll know, I shouldn't gossip, even though it's tempting to do so. Oh, I shouldn't say this terrible thing to that other person. Oh, I shouldn't whisper this about so-and-so. You will begin to get more self-control, and it will be exhibited in your life because your thoughts will already be captive to Christ. You won't have to think about it. You won't have to stop yourself and say, Spirit, guide me in this. The Spirit will have already said, you're mature. You know what to do. Do the right thing. And you'll do that. And what will it show in your life? People will begin to recognize a change in you, number one. So if you've always been a gossip and you stop and you are intentional about never gossiping again, and somebody feeds you something juicy and you don't pass it on, people are going to notice that. If you are known for making snide remarks about people behind their back and you stop doing it, and the only thing you say about other people are positive things, if you do that, people will notice that. And believe me, not just people here in church around you, but people outside, people who don't yet know Christ, they will notice something different about you and give you that opportunity to share the fruit of the Spirit, the gospel, with somebody else. Self-control, really the ultimate fruit. Kind of like cherries, I think, are the ultimate fruit, or whatever your favorite fruit is. Okay? Self-control is this culmination of all this other fruit built up in your life. And self-control is the ultimate evidence of the work of the Spirit in your life. If the Spirit's at work in your life, you can be fully self-controlled, and you can show self-control to others. And listen, if you're self-controlled, you will stand head and shoulders above everybody else in the world. Everybody else in the world, the culture at large, wants us to believe that we're just animals. We're just animals lacking complete self-control. We just do whatever it is we feel like doing as though we're like, I don't know, kangaroos or kittens or something. We have no impulse control. We have no thought control. Just whatever feels good, just do it and get on with it. And, of course, that's just a recipe for disaster. But that's not true. The truth that we have in front of us, the truth that God has given to us, says you're not animals. You bear the image of God within you. And that image of God is capable of being fully self-controlled, is capable of being fully fruitful, is capable of exhibiting all of the fruits that the Spirit wants to raise up in it. And when that is the truth, when our behavior is fully under control, we will exhibit that truth to other people. They'll look at your life and see that it's true. They will see that we bear that image of the Creator of the universe. They will see that we are the temple of His Spirit, that His Spirit dwells within us. They will see in our lives that we are the brothers and sisters and the servants of Jesus Christ. They will see all those things through our ability to control our actions, to love other people, to show joy, to do all these things. They will see something different, and here's the kicker for all of this. The reason that this fruit exists in our life, as I said a minute ago, it's not so we can be better people. It's so that you and I can be better ambassadors and have one more opportunity to share the truth of the gospel with one more person. Amen?